Hi everyone. I'm going to do a quick tour through some of the work that the Centre for HCI Design does in creativity. So that's creative techniques and tools to support those techniques. Right, let me, without further ado, the team, this is not me, this is a team effort. First of all, our glorious leader, Neil Maiden, has been involved in this area of work since 2001, I think. Christine, who I'm sure you've seen walking around, also works in this area. Kos did his PhD here on one of the tools that I will be talking about. Helena is just finishing off her PhD on using creativity techniques with older people. And Marion, you will have seen earlier in one of the talks. We do quite well without technologies. So I think it's a really interesting question to look at, well, where can we use technologies to augment our creative processes, and where actually are does trying to use technology break what we're trying to do? So, you know, I'm not a fan of introducing technology for the sake of it. I'm very interested in seeing where it can augment what we're doing and not hinder what we're doing. Okay. So, yeah, I think I will move on at that point to talk about some of the techniques we use to stimulate creative thinking in creative workshops. The context, this slide is just to say that we've used creativity workshops in a wide range of projects, starting in the area of air traffic control, working with European air traffic controllers on a range of projects about managing aircraft departures and arrivals and so on. Right through to now, we've got a project looking at mobile devices, apps for mobile devices to support creative problem solving in the workplace. So just to say, a range of applications. And here's the kind of history. As I said, back in 2001, Neil ran his first creativity workshop, with the air traffic controllers. During the ensuing kind of 6 or 7 years, we ran a range of projects, mainly with air traffic control organisations in the UK and in Europe, but also moving into some big European research projects looking at learning at work and food traceability. So we sort of applied in various areas. And then a few years ago, we started looking more at creativity support tools, so technologies to support the use of these creative techniques. And a couple of other things that have happened since. So I'm just finishing a 5-year research fellowship looking at this relationship between creativity and development of interactive systems, creativity and technologies. There's been a 2-year funded project looking at information spaces for creative conversations, which I will talk about the outputs from at the end of the talk. And we've also now got the Centre for Creativity and Professional Practice as a focus within the university for people with research and practice interests in creativity, innovation and leadership. So that we've got people from psychology, law, social sciences, arts and informatics all involved in this Centre for Creativity, which now runs a Master's in Innovation, Creativity and Leadership. You might have seen the leaflets around the place. Okay, so all of these techniques we use in the context of a 2-day creativity workshop. So one of these techniques will typically last for 3 or 4 hours, so a half-day session on each technique. In an analogical reasoning session, what we will do is, before the workshop, we will look for an expert in a domain that is analogous to the one in which we're developing our new system. That expert will then come in and just speak about what they do, speak about their job for half an hour. And the participants in the workshop are invited to listen to what the expert is saying and to make connections between the analogous domain and the domain in which they're working that stimulate new thinking. So, for example, it's probably not a very good example, but if you're looking at managing the way in which aircraft are parked in an airport, on an airfield, you could get some interesting insights from looking at how car parking is managed. A very simplistic example, but so that's the kind of way that works. Storyboarding, we tend to use at the end of creative workshops as a way of helping people converge. So there are lots and lots of techniques for idea generation, for divergent thinking, for coming up with loads of ideas. What people often find more difficult is the convergence, so choosing ideas or bringing ideas together into a single kind of storyline which can be supported by a new tool. So storyboarding we tend to use in that context towards the end of the workshop, where there have been lots of ideas, and the challenge is to choose ideas and bring them together, combine them. So we give people maybe half a day to work in a team on, and we set them the challenge to bring in as many of the ideas that have been generated previously in the workshop as possible into a single story. And that story is then taken forward through the project as kind of inspiration for the development of the system. So that's the way in which we use the storyboarding to support convergent thinking, really. This is a picture of our one of our creativity workshops in progress. So here's Neil working with John, who worked for NATS, UK Air Traffic Control. Here are some air traffic controllers, and here are the balloon models they've made in the early stages of the workshop to create a playful atmosphere. This is one of the storyboards they produced. You can see it's very kind of Blue Peterish, lots of string post-its. People just like working with the paper. It's, you know, the physical feel of it is, I don't know, is it easy for people and uninhibiting, if that's a proper word. And meanwhile, all the ideas generated during the workshop are recorded on paper on boards around the room. So that gives you a feel of how they are. The creativity triggers, here's one. Trust is a creativity trigger. So what you do is you say to a group, okay, I want you to take the idea of trust and think about what it means for this system that we're developing. Seems trivial, but the research that we've done comparing the effectiveness of the different techniques suggests that this is actually one of the more effective techniques for producing quite a large number of quite practical new ideas. There are 7 of these triggers, so trust is one, connections is another, others are service, green, as in environmentally friendly. Can't remember all of them, but you get the idea of how we use them. Constraint removal. In constraint removal, we ask people to come up with reasons why their work is difficult, reasons why the system will be hard to build, and people are very good at that. So we get people to come up with the constraints that they're operating under. And then we ask each group in the workshop, so I haven't said, our workshop typically includes about 20 people divided into groups of 4 or 5. And for constraint removal, we ask each group to select 4 or 5 constraints to work with and imagine what would happen if that wasn't a constraint. So imagine removing that constraint, what would you then be able to do? And that generates, again, quite a lot of ideas. They tend to be quite wacky ideas, as in they're not obviously immediately usable, but interesting for the further ideas they might stimulate. So yeah, the constraint removal ideas are a bit kind of out there, but what you then find is people build on them to produce something more kind of implementable. So yeah, I mean, developing computer-based tools to support creative processes, in a sense, it's just HCI. It's just finding out what people are doing and trying to support that. But it's quite difficult HCI because creativity in itself is a bit of an elusive kind of concept, isn't it? We could have spent time talking at the beginning about, well, what is creativity? You know, what does it mean? And of course, there's also many different kinds of creativity, many different domains in which people work creatively. So production of films, production of music, art, creative problem solving in the workplace, and everyday creativity. You know, we're all creative all the time in solving our ongoing day-to-day kind of issues, problems, challenges. You know, getting one child to the dentist while the other's at football practice, what have you. So, you know, we're all creative in many ways. So trying to kind of find a one-size-fits-all solution to supporting creativity isn't going to work. So, you know, we need more detailed analysis of what creativity means in particular contexts. In addition, it's very hard to evaluate how well we do with building creativity support tools because there are so many different dimensions involved. I mean, at the beginning, we found that things like the environment, things like your personal preferences, personal learning styles, things like the type of output you're trying to produce, all have an impact on how creative we can be. And therefore, you know, trying to do any controlled scientific experiment to kind of compare one tool against another is not really going to be feasible. So that's why it's a challenging area, but I think that's why it's sort of interesting. So I just want to start by giving a little view of the kind of research that has been done so far on what creativity support tools should be like. So Shern, how many people are familiar with Shern as a bit of a design guru? Okay, so many people refer back to Shern as having defined, what design's all about. And according to Shern, the language of designing includes sketching and talking, where sketching means not necessarily just kind of drawing a bit of a rough picture. It just means roughing out an idea, as opposed to coming up with a really detailed, preformed idea. So roughing out ideas and talking about them. So sketching is important because it enables people to experiment with ideas. And then as the designer sketches and talks about the design, this allows him or her to reflect on the ideas that are evolving and develop those ideas. So sketching, talking, reflection, equally using a repertoire of examples, as you said. Design typically works by having lots of kind of inspirations to draw on, things other people did that you like and you want to modify a little bit. And at a certain point, a designer evaluates his or her ideas by considering, what will be the consequences of implementing those ideas. So those are the kind of key components of design according to Shern, so things that we want to support in our creativity support tools. There's more from a US National Science Foundation workshop in 2005. So just some general principles again. Choose the black boxes carefully, because what you enable people will do what you enable them to do. So if you want them to do freehand, if you provide the possibility of doing freehand sketching, that's what they'll do. If you only let them do circles and boxes, that's all they'll do. So it's just in a creativity support tool, you have to think about what kind of outputs you want people to be producing and enable them to produce those. Easy, really. Support exploration. So that's an important part of creative thinking, exploratory creativity. Experimentation. I think someone said experimentation. Permission to experiment. Make it enjoyable. There's research to suggest that people are more creative when they're in a playful state, when they're happy. Enable people to try what ifs. What if I did this without suffering any consequences? Then there's support many paths and many styles. Again, there's many different ways of being creative. There's not a recipe that you follow and that's it. People have many different ways of being creative, and a tool needs to try to support all those different styles. And then another one, which I'll come on to later, is that certainly these days, most design happens in teams. It's not about the individual lone genius very often. More commonly, it's about working together as a team. So the support tool needs to support people working as teams, either co-located together in the same time and space, or very often now with global development teams, we need to support distributed asynchronous development. And equally important is this idea of open interchange, seamless operation with other tools. You can't do your creativity in an island and then not be able to use the outputs anywhere else. We need to think about kind of importing data from requirements processes maybe, and exporting to other software development or later design phases. So that maybe boringly, but it's very important as well. So some useful tools already out there. Google Wonder Wheel I like because it allows you to follow, sort of do sort of thinking by free association. Mind mapping, I'm sure you're all very familiar with. There are many tools on the market, many free, which this has also been used successfully in the kind of convergence phase of creative thinking. So you've got lots of ideas and then, what do I do with it? Mind mapping helps you kind of organise and prioritise your ideas, so we found that to be quite useful. Sticky notes, many different forms of sticky notes. Who's used sticky notes? And what do you think of them? Yeah, there's a lady laughing, exactly. My students use these and they go, so why are we doing this when it's so much easier with an actual paper sticky note? So they're there. Actually, we have had some successes with a tool called Lino, I never know how you say it, which is an online sticky note tool which supports distributed collaboration. So, you know, where you can't get together in a room and actually share paper sticky notes, that seems to be quite a good alternative. So you know, the digital sticky notes are coming on, but I think they're not really there yet. Compendium is a research prototype from the Open University, which is, it's about kind of organising your thoughts, in particular, again, for the convergence stage, where you want to look at the pros and cons of different solutions to help you choose which ideas to take forward. Our students have kind of used it and been sort of moderately impressed. That's available free from the website there. Combind formation, we demonstrated this in the creativity and design module this year, and most people really quite liked it. So what this does, it's a tool from the University of Texas, and it's basic. So a couple of people went, well, it's just like Google image search, isn't it? Which it kind of is, except it's more. It's not very much more, but actually the extra that it does is very sort of productive. So what you can do with Combind formation is at the same time do a range of searches, so you can do a sort of image search on Google at the same time as a text search on Yahoo, or an image search on Flickr as well. So you can combine several searches in one go. And the tool provides so it brings up the results of these searches in a sort of frame on your screen, and then anything of interest you can drag into the central area to create a sort of mood board, if you like, or just to compile the ideas that look of interest and you want to look into further. And the nice thing that it does then is if you position ideas close to each other in your central area, it will start combining those ideas for you and going off and looking for searches based on the combination of those ideas, hence the name of the tool. And that turns out to be quite interesting. So, you know, and this is an example of where we're not just kind of doing what we could have done anyway with our own heads and with pen and paper, but we're augmenting what we would be able to do on our own. So I think this is quite a nice example of where technology can really contribute something. Yes, more latterly, we've been looking at a number of tools and the way they can support teamwork in creative design. So our first exploration was with some children working on a multi-touch table in a classroom design task, which was great fun. We were looking for how they could work as a team on a common design task, and we were looking at the kind of social factors that can get in the way of an effective creative process. So there's this evaluation apprehension, is where you're too nervous to do anything because you think people might judge you on it. So we were kind of looking out for that in the children. There's production blocking, where one person takes the floor and won't let anyone else have a go. We were looking out for that as well. And there's social loafing, where you just kind of sit back and go, they're doing really well, I don't think I'll bother. No. So there's these kind of social influences that can get in the way of effective creative thinking. And in this study with the children, we observed lots of production blocking. They were so excited, so they all wanted to use the table and wouldn't, try and elbowing everyone else out of the way. One might hope that adults would be different. This is the most recent work we've been doing, looking at how we can use a space, so it's a physical and a virtual space, if you like, to support teams of people working on a design process that goes on for a period of sort of 4 or 5 weeks, where the team needs to work together in the same place for a short period each week, so for an hour or so each week, but then in between that they need to develop their design ideas when they're all in their different locations, so in a distributed way. So we've had these spaces for a couple of years. They're in essence very simple. We've got a whiteboard, and they're in the interaction lab if you add the two. We've got a whiteboard. We've got a whiteboard on the wall that's projected space, and we've got a whiteboard on the table that's initially had projection and video recording. And we've had teams of students on our creativity and design course working in these spaces, and have just been observing what use they make of them, over a couple of years, and sort of developing the space on that basis. So this is year one. You can see, so we've got a group of students here. What they've got over here is, look, they've been using online sticky notes. They've got their shared work on the sticky notes there. And here, the feedback from the first year was, well, these digital spaces are all very nice, but actually we use the paper, we use this for our creative thinking. All right? So they're actually doing their brainstorming over here. And the table, although successful, successful. And then in the second year, we made the spaces simpler. So we took out the ability to video record because no one used it, it was just confusing. We provided bigger tables. We gave more training, importantly. And the results this year were much more successful in terms of the spaces were evaluated much more favourably by the students, and by observation they made much richer use of the spaces. We're still sort of analysing the data from this year, but what I can see initially is the projected space here is used mainly for shared access to reference materials, inspirations from internet searches, and then also some joint creation of written materials. So one person would be sitting here typing, and that, you know, they'd all be able to see what was being written, so you can jointly develop your documents. Again, this physical whiteboard was very popular for doing the creative thinking, the brainstorming, challenging boundaries, etc. And the table was used more, much bigger. They brought in their physical artefacts from previous weeks and worked. So sometimes they worked in private spaces, they had their own little bit of the whiteboard, and sometimes it was a shared space. So that bigger table, much more effective, except it was too big now because they couldn't move around the table. So, you know, maybe next year we'll get it right. Going work, yes, we're very interested to evaluate, well, both the techniques and the technologies. So if anyone is interested in coming in and doing even a short case study using the creative design stations, we'd be very happy to hear from you and, you know, look at how effectively that kind of space can support the design processes that you're all engaged in. So that'd be great. One thing which I should mention is the Mirror project. This is about learning at work through creative problem solving, and as part of that, two interesting areas of development are looking at mobile apps for to support creative problem solving, and online discussion fora, sort of along the lines of open innovation, but restricted open innovation, where you can choose who participates in that community. So yeah, with that in mind, if anyone is interested to, and I hope you are interested to continue the conversation afterwards, I've experimentally set up a discussion forum on Google Moderator. So, you know, if you're feeling interested in this area, let's continue the discussion online after this.